Hey everyone, I hope you're all well. So we're reaching the end of 2020. So I thought for today's video I would do a little 2020 favourites video. All the stuff I'm kind of mentioning is pretty much the main things that have kept me entertained over 2020, which has been tough to do. So I'm going to start with books. So the first book I wanted to mention was The Evolution by Tom and Giovanna Fletcher. So this is the second book in a series that Tom and G have written. The whole series is set in the future. There's been no girls born for 50 years. So the human race is basically dying, and then Eve is born. I actually really enjoyed this book. I definitely wouldn't say it's as good as the first book. I think kind of in the middle it's a bit slow. But it definitely picks up towards the end and it's got a really good ending on it. But I've just really enjoyed reading this whole series. I just absolutely love that kind of like dystopian future sort of style, and just like books and stuff that are about kind of like development of technology and things. So the second book I wanted to talk about is called Little Eyes, and it's by, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, Samantha Schweblin. It's kind of another dystopian future style of book about a gadget. I think it's pronounced Kentucky, but basically these Kentuckys are like cute little animals that have cameras in them, and they're controlled by another random person around the earth. You can decide to own a Kentucky, or you can kind of decide to be a Kentucky. So this book is actually a book of short stories, so it focuses on different people around the world and their experience with these Kentuckys. And I just thought it was a really interesting concept for a book. The author is in English, so the book is translated, which I think is done really well. But it was definitely a different read for me, and I did really enjoy it, so I would definitely giving it a go if it sounds like your type of thing. And the final book I wanted to talk about is called The Flat Share, and that is by Beth O'Leary. This is a book I've heard a lot of people talking about over the last year or so I thought I'd give it a go. So the main gist for this book is it's about two people, Tiffany and Leon, who have never met before, but they share a one-bedroom flat. So because of their work shifts, they basically share a bed and share a flat without actually living there together. I would say it's kind of a typical easy chick lit kind of read, but I think there is also some side points to the main plot which are a bit more deep, and they kind of address like quite important topics like mental health and kind of gaslighting and all that sort of stuff. So moving on to films, I am like so behind on films. There's so many like classics that I've never watched, and I tell people I haven't watched these films, they're like, oh god, how have you never watched that before? So yeah, a few of them you probably have watched, but just in case there's people out there that are like me, I'll give them a mention anyway. So the first film I wanted to mention was The Truman Show. If you are one of the few people that hasn't watched The Truman Show, just to give you a main gist of it, it's about a man who is played by Jim Carrey, who thinks he lives a normal life. Actually, everything in his life is staged and it's filmed as part of a television show, so all the people that are in his life are actors, and it is all just filmed 24/7. I thought it was going to be one of those films that, you know, is like quite good back in the day, but now you watch it, it's a bit dated. But I actually think this film holds up really well. Both me and Josh had never watched it, and we both really enjoyed it. So another film which is an absolute classic, which I only just watched this year, was Inception. I think the thing that put me off about watching Inception is that I'd always heard that it's quite a hard film to follow, and it's got quite like a subjective ending, so you kind of make your own assumptions on what is true and what's not. Kind of really regret not watching it sooner, because I honestly absolutely love this film. I was hooked from beginning to end. So next film actually came out in the last year, and that is 1917. So 1917 is a British war film. This kind of film isn't usually my style, but I'm actually surprised by how much I got into it and how much I enjoyed it. And the main thing that makes it stand out is its cinematography. So the film itself is made out to look like one continuous long shot, so there's like absolutely no film cuts in it whatsoever. I just thought it was really clever and really well done, and the acting in it was also incredible. So moving on to Disney films, because I actually watched all the Pirates of the Caribbean films this year for the very first time. So I'd only watched the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, and that I'd only watched last year before we went to Disney World. So basically in lockdown, me and Josh decided to watch all 5 of them, and I honestly absolutely loved them. I think the first 2 are the best, and then it starts to go a bit downhill, but they're all still really enjoyable anyway. The production on those films is just like another level. So moving on to Onward. So Onward is a Disney Pixar film. It's basically about 2 elves that live in this kind of fantasy world where all the creatures have kind of become dependent on technology and have got a bit lazy with magic, but they need to complete a quest which obviously relies on magic to hopefully be reunited with their dad. I absolutely love Disney Pixar. It's probably my favourite part of the Disney franchise. Around the beginning of next year, I will hopefully be uploading a video where I actually rank every single Pixar film. I would say this film was just classic Pixar. It had funny moments, it had sad moments, it had really like heartwarming moments. I think it's worth watching, but I definitely don't think it's up there as one of my favourites. So moving on to TV shows, first one being a series called Unbelievable. So this was basically a mini-series based on a true story where a girl was charged for lying about being raped. No one finds out that she was actually telling the truth until some detectives on like a completely separate case get involved. It was a really hard watch, but honestly it's done so well. It did such a good job at telling such an important story about how women or even men should be treated if they're brave enough to come forward and tell their story. So yeah, it's a hard one, but I would definitely recommend watching it. So moving on to another quite hard-hitting series, and that is When They See Us. So this was another mini-series based on a true story of the Central Park 5, where 5 black kids were wrongfully convicted and sent to prison for years. This was another hard watch, but a really important series to watch, and it was done so well. Again, the acting was absolutely incredible in it, so I would definitely give that a watch. So moving on to Crown season 4. I absolutely love The Crown. I think it's one of my favourite series to come out of Netflix. I was so excited for season 4. The introduction of Princess Diana and Margaret Thatcher made things really interesting, and like kind of where we're getting to all the really juicy stuff with the royal family. The acting in The Crown is so good. Olivia Colman does an amazing job as the Queen. As much as I loved Claire Foy in the first 2 series, I feel like Olivia Colman's done such a good job that I totally forget that Claire Foy ever played the Queen now. Obviously the next season is going to be a completely different cast again, so it'll be kind of sad to see the current cast go, because I think they've done a really good job, but I'm also intrigued to see what the new cast are going to be like, and also just like how they approach some of the topics that are kind of closer to present day. So the last thing I wanted to talk about that is on Netflix is The Umbrella Academy. So Umbrella Academy is basically a show based off a superhero comic book written by Jared Way. Now superhero stuff isn't usually my thing. I feel like this series got a bit of everything. It's obviously got all those superhero elements, but it's also got a bit of drama, it's also got a bit of comedy. The soundtrack is another level for this series. The music just always fits so well with the current scene. I'm not really big on fight scenes, like those parts in films just bore me, but Umbrella Academy like takes it to another level. Like the music fits so perfectly and it's just like so cool. I cannot recommend the show enough. This is probably the series me and Josh binged the quickest this year. We watched the 2 seasons so quickly and I am so excited for the 3rd season. So moving on to stuff that's on Disney Plus. So the first thing I wanted to mention from Disney Plus was the Imagineering Story. This was the very first thing I watched on Disney Plus, and it was the thing that I was most excited about watching on Disney Plus. So the Imagineering Story is basically all about the Disney parks and kind of the history and how all the ideas came together and how things were made. I absolutely love that sort of behind the scenes kind of geeky stuff. The Imagineers that work on the Disney parks are just so clever, and it was great to learn more about that and how things have come together. Hopefully Disney continues to bring out stuff like that, because I absolutely love that sort of stuff. So moving on to Pick of the Litter. So a while back there was a film called Pick of the Litter, which basically followed a bunch of puppies on their journey to become guide dogs, and basically Disney Plus picked that up and turned that into a series. It is the most adorable thing you will ever watch. I was just like amazed to see the amount of effort that goes into training these dogs and looking after these dogs. I would just really recommend watching this show. With all the doom and gloom kind of around at the moment, it's kind of that perfect wholesome TV. So the very last show I wanted to mention, which isn't a new discovery, it's something that I've loved for a very long time, that is Strictly Come Dancing. Strictly has been pretty much my favourite TV show since I was about like 12. The 2020 series I really got into. The last couple of years of Strictly I've struggled to keep up with it. I just haven't had a chance to watch a lot of it live. So it was nice this year, obviously being home so much, being able to actually like properly immerse myself in it again. And I just feel like the cast and crew really need to be given props for managing to put on a show like that in a year like 2020 and do it all safely. I was very happy with Bill and Oaty winning.
Yes! Yes!
Bill Bailey wasn't the best dancer on Strictly, but he kind of really immersed himself in the experience and just put absolutely everything into it. And I feel like at the beginning of the series, everyone just thought he was going to be the joke act because he's a comedian and just he would last a little bit and then he'd be gone. But he was actually really good. His partnership with OT as well was just absolutely perfect. I absolutely love OT. And yeah, I just think he was the kind of winner that we needed in 2020. I just wanted to give that show a special mention because I feel like this year has really like reignited my love for it. So music is probably the one thing I've not really been into this year. I think because most of the time when I listen to stuff is either when I'm commuting to work or I'm sat at my desk at work in the office. And obviously I haven't done a lot of either of those things this year because I've been working from home. A few things that I was kind of into at the beginning of the year, before lockdown, was the Dunwells. So the Dunwells supported Scouting for Girls when I saw them on their tour last year. So I spent a lot of the beginning of the year kind of researching them a bit more and listening to all their albums. And yeah, they're pretty good and they deserve more recognition. Another thing I was so into at the beginning of the year was the Book of Mormon soundtrack. I actually went to see Book of Mormon at the very beginning of the year. I so fell in love with the soundtrack. I honestly had it on repeat for about 2 months straight. The musical as a whole is just absolutely hilarious. I would just definitely recommend going to see it. Kind of the rest of the year, I didn't really get into much stuff. So kind of a few that I dipped in and out of and enjoyed that I would just give a quick mention to. Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa, Confetti by Little Mix, and Young Dumb Thrills by McFly. The only album I really had on repeat for a little bit was Infinite Things by Ploma Faith. Ploma is probably one of my favourite artists. I really like the album. My favourite songs from it are probably Gold and I'd Die For You. It's not my favourite Ploma album. Every single album she does, she changes it up a bit, so it's kind of like you're getting a new Ploma era every time you listen to a new album. So yeah, it was a bit different, but that's what Ploma does quite well. I've been playing a lot more games this year. We actually decided to get a Nintendo Switch at the beginning of lockdown. I've played quite a few games on it and I've got a few more that I want to try out at some point, but my favourite ones at the moment, Luigi's Mansion 3. I think this game is such a great two-player game. I think we completed it in about 15 to 20 hours, but it was so much fun and it was so great for me and Josh to play together. The other game I've really loved this year that I cannot go without mentioning because it's been like a staple part of my 2020, and that of course is Animal Crossing. I used to play Animal Crossing on the Nintendo DS back when I was a kid, so I mainly wanted to get it for nostalgic reasons. It's such a great development from the older games. You've still got all those classic characters in it. It's still got like the same sounds and stuff it just made me feel so nostalgic when I first started playing it. It's so good. It's that perfect kind of chilled game, perfect kind of escapism in a year like 2020. Like, I've been playing for over 300 hours on it, which is really bad, but I still feel like I'm nowhere near done with the game. And also they're just like continuously adding updates to the game, and there's like seasonal events and stuff, so there's kind of always something new that keeps the game fresh. So moving on to YouTubers, I thought I'd mention a few YouTubers that I've discovered in the last year. I'm warning you now, these are all Disney YouTubers. So I'm going to start with Caitlin Jones. So Caitlin is a Disney house member. She works at Disneyland Paris. She does a lot of videos about her experience, but she also does a lot of vlogs too when the parks were open. She's definitely one worth checking out. So moving on to Ponzi's Palace, Libby is a Disney YouTuber from the US. Her videos are always quite unique and I feel like she's always trying to think out the box with stuff. She did a series on her channel called Quarantine Queen where she ranked all the Disney princesses based on how well she think they would have handled the pandemic. It was just so funny and it's such a great idea. And she's got lots of stuff like that, so I definitely go watch her. So moving on to the Kershaw Adventures. So these guys are basically Disney family vloggers. Family vloggers aren't normally my thing, but I honestly love these guys so much. I think the thing that makes them stand out from other family vloggers is that their ideas and their editing is like another level. It's really clever, so yeah, definitely worth checking them out. So last YouTubers I wanted to mention were Yaz and Ash. These guys are a couple from the UK that are Disney YouTubers. They tend to mainly vlog their trips, so they went on to Disneyland Paris trip after the reopening. They were really enjoyable vlogs, but they were also really informative. They also have a clothing brand called Magical Day Apparel, which I have bought stuff from and absolutely love. They just seem like such like down-to-earth people, and they're just also like really talented as well. So moving on to the last thing I wanted to mention that I've been loving, like apps and software. So the first one being Duolingo. So I've been using Duolingo to learn French pretty much all year. it really helps you pick up all your skills. So obviously like your listening, your reading, your writing and your speaking. It's kind of all covered in there, and I just feel like my French has improved massively. So moving on to Notion. So Notion is basically an all-in-one workspace app where you can basically organise everything in your life. I'm so glad I discovered this app because I store all my lists for absolutely everything in there. And honestly, I just like cannot recommend it enough. It's really helped me to just organise my life a bit better, and has helped me try to keep productive in a year that it's very difficult to be productive. So the last one I wanted to mention is Davinci Resolve. So Resolve is basically a video editing software. So I used to use Premiere Pro, but I actually had like a free torrented version that was a very old version, and I cannot justify paying the prices that Adobe charge. It's just ridiculous. I started looking into 3 alternatives and I came across Davinci Resolve, and honestly I cannot recommend it enough. You can do everything in it that you can do in Premiere Pro, everything you need for your YouTube videos. I would say it's quite difficult to use at first, so if you're a complete beginner when it comes to video editing, it might take you a while to get your head around it. If you're someone like me who's done a lot of editing over the years and you've used things like Premiere Pro, you'll probably pick it up a lot quicker. That is definitely something that's been a real beneficial find this year. So yeah, that's kind of all my 2020 favourites. Let me know down below kind of what you've been enjoying this year. I hope you're having a lovely Christmas despite the current circumstances. And yeah, I shall speak to you in the new year. Fingers crossed for 2021, please.